Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Starlink's numbers in Europe and Africa, Australia, as far as performance goes, looking really good. In some cases, much better than the aggregate of all providers, and people love it there. In fact, they love it a whole lot more than other providers. Be right back with the numbers. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So I want to take a look at the latest speed test data. This is from Ookla for Starlink, and you can see here in the headline, new speed test data shows Starlink performance is mixed, but that's a good thing. Satellite providers are playing no small part in the rapid expansion of global connectivity. Some experts predict that there will be 58,000 satellites orbiting the Earth by 2030, a nearly 725% increase from 2023. That's just over 2023. Of course, the increase has been really crazy since, let's say, 10 years ago, because now we've got low Earth orbit satellites that operate on a constellation kind of thing, as opposed to having just a few geosynchronous satellites up there in orbit. You now have thousands in orbit for one provider. So that's been the big change. But even you see here a 725% increase just from 2023, and we can expect that to increase even more. We'll see here as we get towards the end of this article that there's other planned constellations that are going to be launched as well that we're aware of. So again, this is talking about providers in Africa, Europe, and Oceania, which that was not around when I was in school. We called it Australia, but now that encompasses Australia, New Zealand, and some other places right around there. Just like there were 9 planets when I was in school, and now there's 8. I'm not happy about that. I was not happy about the motion of Pluto, but yeah, things change. So we've got Starlink users across different continents continue to love the service. NPS, it mentions here that they examine NPS, or Net Promoter Score. NPS is based on speed test user responses after being asked how likely they are to recommend their provider to friends or family on a 0 to 10 scale. NPS ratings are categorized into detractors, 0 to 6, passives, which would be a score of 7 to 8, and then promoters, Net Promoter Score 9 to 10, and is calculated as the percent of promoters minus the detractors. And then it's got times 100, and I'm not sure exactly why it has that, because it's a percentage, so you don't really actually multiply it by 100. Any NPS score above 0 indicates that a provider's audience is more loyal than not. So this is what you're looking at here. This will be your Net Promoter Score. So you've got your detractors. So anything 0 to 6 is considered a detractor. So that's even somebody kind of in the middle range that might say, feel this way or that way about it. So let's say they're a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10. Then you've got passives, 7 to 8. So even somebody who's a 7 or 8 on a 0 out of 10 scale, they're considered passive. It says here, satisfied but unenthusiastic, who are vulnerable to competitive offerings and maybe not satisfied enough to promote the service, to be a big champion of it, to be a fan, so to speak. And then you've got your promoters. Those are people that are in the 9 to 10 range. Those are your fans that would be more likely to promote the service. So basically where the score works is, again, it's the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. So if let's say you've got 10% detractors and you've got 50% promoters and 40% passives, then you would take your 50% promoters minus your 10% detractors. You add the folks that are 7 and 8, and that gives you a Net Promoter Score of 40, for example. And we'll see actually here, as you look at this is kind of where Starlink was falling. Let's see here. So again, that's what they said there, and that somehow that shifted up. So here is wow, that's really small. So let me make this a little bit bigger. So here you see what we're looking at as far as NPS scores. So you've got all providers combined is the non-filled in circles, and you've got the filled in circles are SpaceX. So you're looking at SpaceX over here. So this is your Net Promoter Score. So 40 is about where 40 to 60 is where they're looking on some of these scores. So the lowest they've got for Net Promoter is just under 40%. Then you've got UK and Italy here, and New Zealand and France, and those looks like France is maybe in the 60% range. If this is 20, this is 40, this would be about 60. So you got between roughly 40 to 60%, with up in the maybe 50 to 60 range for these here. And then you've got your net promoter scores down here of all other providers, and you can see, and then you've got your speeds plotted on here as well. So you can see this is 120 megabits per second right here. This is 90, 60, etc. So you can see that Starlink is kind of clustered above 100 for these, a little below, well, close, actually, yeah, this is 100 is right about here, I guess. So close to 100, and then you got Germany here below 100. And then you've got your other providers. So you've got New Zealand, as far as exceeding Starlink, you've got New Zealand and France exceeding them, but these others, as far as the average, this is taking all the providers. So this could be some fiber providers averaged with some DSL providers, which would bring these scores down. So you've got Germany, UK, Italy. These are all all of these are not very good net promoter scores, because these are minus scores, right? So they've got actually more detractors than they have promoters. So you see here about the best you've got is France at a little bit over minus 20 on the net promoter score, compared to over 40 on most of these here. So doing very good there. And you see speed wise, they're doing fairly decent. They're hovering around 100 megabits per second. Above or below that, very close, where you've got some of these countries clustered well below, and then you got these couple here that look good. So France had the highest NPS among the aggregate of fixed broadband providers for the countries we surveyed at minus 15.98, so again, negative. And fixed broadband providers had a much faster median download speed at 165.37 compared to Starlink's 107.56. That would be in France. In New Zealand, there was a similar story, with the aggregate of fixed broadband providers having a minus 20.40 NPS to Starlink's 48.83. Big difference there, while having a faster median download speed of 147.86 megabits per second compared to 113.78 for Starlink for the second quarter of 2023. So again, they're talking about the speeds here for these two countries exceeding what Starlink has had. Germany, which had the lowest NPS rating of aggregate of fixed broadband providers in Europe at minus 31.10, also had the smallest difference in NPS, with Starlink scoring 38.19, but it's still a huge difference there. Interestingly, the aggregate of fixed broadband providers and Starlink both had similar median download speeds of 83.16 and 82.56 megabits per second, respectively. So Starlink, when you're looking at the average, is very close to everybody. And that's taking into account, obviously, these that are much higher than Starlink and these that are lower, and then Starlink kind of being clustered in this general area. That's where they're getting the 80 from here. And the 80 something here is going to be these two high ones and these low ones, kind of that median. In our last report, we found a wide NPS gap between the US and rural Starlink users. I believe I did a video back then as well, who often have fewer options for fixed broadband access and the corresponding aggregate of fixed broadband providers. Given that all 5 of these countries have rural or remote regions that are underserved or not served by traditional broadband offerings, it may be no surprise that Starlink users who reside in those areas may feel positive about having access to fast broadband internet. And I said the same thing back when I talked about this with the US. So that makes perfect sense. And that is really where Starlink is going to shine. And it's really where people are going to get it, frankly. So pretty much everybody who's on Starlink is going to be in an area where they have poor broadband service. They probably never had good broadband service, or maybe they moved to an area that suddenly didn't have it. But in most cases, it's people who their whole lives have had really bad broadband service, and then suddenly you give them something. Maybe they were getting 10 megabits per second or less wherever they were, or it could be 20 or 30 megabits per second. Maybe some of these fixed providers that are there that are not so good, and then suddenly you give them something that's good, and they're thrilled, right? So their net promoter score is going to be high. Whereas for those who have wired broadband service and they've had it a long time, it's been fairly decent, but they're going to be harder to please because they're going to be expecting more, and they're just not, they're not somebody who didn't have something and suddenly does. So you get fans when you do that. It's like suddenly they're evangelists basically, because they suddenly have this broadband service that is closer to what almost everybody else in the world has, or in their country if they're in a very rural area, and they're just thrilled about it. So they become fans. Like I say, they're really evangelist net promoters, where they're telling everybody how happy they are, and they're happy to tell people that. Starlink speeds over 100 megabits per second in 14 European countries during second quarter 2023, speed stabilizing across Europe. Starlink results were the fastest among satellite providers we surveyed, and that's not surprising because really they are the only ones that they're looking at right now, and primarily really the only ones that have low Earth orbit satellites, and that's a difference. So Starlink's satellites are 300-400 miles up as opposed to 20,000-30,000 miles up for those that are in geosynchronous orbit. So those are single satellites generally that are, or maybe just a couple. I'm not sure exactly how they work, but those are satellites that are having to serve lots of customers from very, very far away. The speeds are much lower. Latency is much higher. So it's not surprising that they would be the fastest among the satellite providers so far that are surveyed. Starlink quarter-to-quarter speeds improved or remained about the same between 5% and -5% in 23 countries, while decreasing in 4 countries. Among the 27 European countries we surveyed, Starlink had median download speeds greater than 100 megabits per second in 14 countries, greater than 90 megabits per second in 20 countries, and greater than 80 in 24 countries, with only 3 countries failing to reach 70 megabits per second. SkyLogic, while delivering speeds slower than Starlink, showed stabilized broadband speeds over the past year for those seeking a Starlink alternative. So, SkyLogic is looking at what we're showing here for them. They are a geosynchronous satellite provider, because when you look at the speeds and the latency, you can tell that. Let me see if I can get this even bigger so I can see these things. Here we go. There you go. That's much better. Okay. So you see here satellite performance in Austria, and I can click through all these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just what you're looking at here. So the purple line is SpaceX, and the solid lines are download, and the dashed lines are upload speeds. All other providers would be this gray line. So this is download for Starlink and for other providers. Then you've got download for SkyLogic. That's this red line here. You can see much lower, although stable, as they said. Then you've got your upload speeds here. So again, for Austria, you can see Starlink is leading all other providers by quite a bit on the download side. You got, again, this is 90 megabits per second here. They're over that. And then you got a little over 60 to close to 70 to 80 in there, right there. And then you've got SkyLogic somewhere hovering around 30. Then your upload speeds, it looks like Starlink and all of the providers were very close for a while, but all of the providers, it looks like Starlink had dipped a bit and all of the providers went up just a bit. So there's a little bit of a gap there. And then you've got SkyLogic, which is lower than everybody on that. Here we got Belgium. Again, you've got Starlink on top, and all other providers. They don't have the other satellite service listed there. And then you've got on the upload speeds, again, all of the providers are ahead of Starlink, not by that much, but they are ahead. This is Bulgaria. You've got, again, Starlink higher than the others, and you can see here quite a bit lower on the upload speeds, but quite a bit higher in the download speeds for Starlink. This would be Croatia, and you do have SkyLogic on this one. Again, you've got Starlink well in the lead there, and upload speeds fairly close right there. They're not high. They're looks like around 20 megabits per second, but definitely Starlink looking good there. Here as well, this is Czech Republic. Now here you've got Denmark, and you've got Denmark, all of the providers are above Starlink. So the speeds here for all of the providers are quite a bit higher. You can see they're later, Q1 2023, Q2, they're up to about 200 megabits per second. Starlink's doing actually very well in this country. They're over 100 megabits per second, at times up to 150. And one of the things about Starlink is it's kind of an up and down kind of thing. Unlike, you might have some of this with a wired provider where they put in some infrastructure and then they get lots of customers, and then suddenly their network gets busy. So there's going to be maybe more latency and speed slowdowns as you get drop packets, those kinds of things, as maybe they get more customers than their bandwidth can handle. But they can upgrade that pretty quickly. They just do that. And for a satellite provider, they launch the satellites in a particular area as part of the constellation. And if they're going to start covering a new area, then they kind of adjust those portions of the satellites to go over that new area. And as they get that up there, Speeds look pretty good as they start to sign up customers in those areas. As they get more subscribers, then they start getting more use. And as the satellites get more use, the speeds start to slow down. But they're continually, as they're launching these areas, as they're launching, literally, these new areas, they add more satellites to the constellation in the area, and they can handle more subscribers. So you'll see when you look at Starlink, when they deploy satellites in a particular location, you know, they're up there, but when they really focus on opening up a new territory and they've got the satellites in that particular area to handle those subscribers, then you see the speeds look really good to start, and then they'll dip as they get subscribers, and then they'll add more satellites over that area, and they'll go up again, and then things start to stabilize. And you see that kind of here. You see it dropped as they probably got more subscribers, then they maybe launched a few more satellites in that area, and then drops again. So that's kind of what you see. But you can see also here, so obviously the other providers were doing increases to their infrastructure. Who knows what they did? Maybe they had more fiber, maybe more providers started providing fiber service. So you saw that could be the reason that all other providers increased here, or they increased the speeds that they made available, those kinds of things. Here we got Starlink way ahead in Estonia, close to 100 megabits per second. We've got Finland. Finland it looks like a new market. Again, launched here, dropped a little bit, starting to recover. Finland looks, these providers, very steady. France, we saw that France was ahead of Starlink, so France has got higher speeds in general, but Starlink's not doing too bad there. And again, you've got your SkyLogic service there. So I won't go through all of these. This is Germany. Looks like Starlink, these are crossing here, so Starlink was doing better. Germany's been improving slightly over time. Starlink, maybe as they get more subscribers, starting to decrease in speed. So again, they can adjust that, or address that, I should say, by adjusting the satellites, launching more satellites into the constellation. So scroll down here. I won't look at all of these, but here's some kind of summary of these numbers. So over the past year, we've seen huge developments in the global satellite market, Europe notwithstanding, with Amazon's Kuiper project, or Project Kuiper. Moving forward, the EU creating its own satellite constellation, and OneWeb and Utilsat merging. While Starlink continues to lead for performance among satellite providers we surveyed, Starlink has experienced some major hurdles over the past year as users flock to the service and speeds have subsequently dipped. But of note, those concerns seem to have started allaying in most of Europe during Q2 2023. So again, while they are decreasing in some areas, they look pretty good, being close to 100 megabits per second or better in lots of countries. At first glance, year over year, median download speeds for Starlink are about the same, -5 to +5, or better, greater than 5%. From Q2 to year over year, basically, Q2 2022 to 2023, 15 countries, and slower, decreasing more than 5% in 8 countries. So let's see, but among the 27 countries we surveyed during Q2 2023, Starlink had speeds faster than the aggregate of all fixed broadband providers combined in 11 countries. You see those countries listed there. Those speeds were most notably faster in Croatia and Greece for Starlink at 94.41 megabits per second to 45.24 megabits per second, and 108.97, I'm assuming that would be Greece, megabits per second for Starlink, to 44.09 megabits per second for other providers in Greece. During Q2 2023, speeds were about the same in 4 countries. You see there Finland, Slovenia, Germany, and Lithuania. And speeds were slower than the aggregate of fixed broadband providers in 12 countries. And you see that list there, but it says most notably Poland, Spain, Romania, Denmark, and France, which saw between 50% and 105% faster aggregate fixed broadband speeds than Starlink. Quarterly download speeds stabilizing or improving. Looking at results from Q1 to Q2 2023, median download speeds for Starlink remained about the same, again between 5% to -5, in 23 countries, while decreasing in 4. That's a big deal, especially given Starlink had median download speeds greater than 100 meg in 14 countries and greater than 90 in 20 countries and greater than 80 in 24 countries, with only 3 countries failing to reach 70 megabits per second. The top 10 fastest Starlink download speeds in European countries you see here. So you got Switzerland, 122.47. Denmark, 117, Austria, 111, Belgium, 111, Hungary, 108, France, 107, Ireland, 104, Estonia, 102, Portugal, 101, and then Latvia, 100. So all of these are over 100 megabits per second. Upload speeds for Starlink are down year over year, but quarterly speeds almost all improved or were the same. So again, looking year over year, they've gone down, but they're improving somewhat, or about the same, actually, it says, for the last quarterly speeds. So upload speeds for Starlink mostly decreased, notably year over year, but with only UK showing an improved median upload speed in Q2 2023 out of 27 countries surveyed. However, looking at quarter to quarter, Q2 2023 upload speeds for Starlink stayed about the same or improved in 25 out of 27 countries, with only Greece and Ireland showing declines. For upload speed, Starlink, all 27 countries we surveyed had upload speeds between 10 and 15 megabits per second, except Portugal, 17.7, Hungary, 16.91, Croatia, 16.12, Bulgaria, 15.93, Romania, 15.82, and Spain, 15.79, Poland, 9.11. So you can see it's, upload speeds are going to be an issue. It's an issue for cable, and cable is trying to do things with DOCSIS 3.1 to get faster upload speeds, DOCSIS 4.0 to possibly get symmetrical fast upload speeds, and satellite, I'm not sure what the answer is there, other than to maybe get additional capacity on these satellites where they can, like they're doing with cable, allocate just more spectrum in general total, so that you can have maybe the same download speeds or a little bit faster download speeds plus faster upload speeds. Multiserver latency is stabilizing for Starlink users across Europe. So again, latency is a big issue for people, and it's a big issue with satellite. But really, it's the big issue for geosynchronous satellite. Again, those are the satellites that are thousands, tens of thousands of miles up in space versus 300-400 miles. As a low Earth orbiting or LEO satellite internet provider, Starlink has a leg up on some satellite competitors who rely on further away geosynchronous Earth orbit, GEO, and medium Earth orbit, MEO, satellite constellations. However, once again, all the aggregates of all fixed broadband providers in Europe had much lower multi-server latencies than Starlink, ViaSat, which had latencies over 600 milliseconds, and SkyLogic, which had latencies over 700 milliseconds. You can see the huge difference there. That being said, Starlink still saw multi-server latencies under 60 milliseconds in the UK, Spain, Portugal, and Belgium. Starlink saw most countries multi-server latencies between 60 and 90 milliseconds. That's not great. It's not terrible, though. Okay, so again, if you are the target market for Starlink, you don't care that much about this. You're probably not gaming. I suppose you could be, but I mean, if you're a gamer, you're not going to have a happy experience on any satellite service, I don't think, or any other application that requires low latency. You'll still be able to stream stuff, and you might have some hiccups there, but I think in general, these kinds of latencies are going to be good, and that's why people report that they're very happy with the service. So while 60 to 90 is not great, it's certainly much better than 600 milliseconds or 700 milliseconds. Starlink speeds stabilize in Oceania. Again, that would be like Australia. Here we've got Tonga. I think I was looking at this earlier, which is why Tonga is first. So let's see what we got here. So we got Australia, SpaceX. Again, you're seeing right here SpaceX close to, looks like maybe over 100 download speeds here versus here on your other providers. And you got your upload speeds right here. So they're lower on the upload speeds as it's expected. Then you've got New Zealand, quite a bit lower on the upload speeds here. Obviously, New Zealand is better both on the download and the upload as far as Starlink goes, but Starlink is still doing fairly well on the download. Then you've got Tonga doing much better on the download speeds and really about the same on the upload speeds. That's kind of a tie. It's funny how they track together with all of the broadband providers on their upload speeds, but they're doing very well in Tonga. Now, as far, I say very well, they're obviously their download speeds are quite a bit lower than they are in other countries. This could be a new area for them. That may be why. Or maybe there's just not that many. Could be there's not many subscribers, so they just don't have many satellites kind of that they're making use of over in that area. as they kind of position those. So that could be a reason why, or maybe they'll be in the process of launching more that will cover that. Starlink in Africa is off to a promising start. So this is a new territory for them. And you see here Nigeria, you can see the median upload and median download speeds. What are we looking at here? So this is different. So we got Starlink here. So this is SpaceX Starlink. So you can see their upload is the purple. They switched around their charts here. So upload is the purple. Download is right here. So this is their download. And that's compared to all of the providers. You can see all of the providers, their download speed is way down here at 15.6 compared to 63.69 for Starlink. And again, this is a new territory. And I would expect, in a new territory that their speeds would actually be higher, as I've said, because as they launch that constellation, they don't have a lot of subscribers on there and the speeds are high. But again, they kind of, I'm sure they position these satellites where they're going to have the most customers, and they're probably not positioning a whole bunch of them right now. They can certainly, and they don't have a lot of competition, possibly. If we look at what's here, so that's another thing, another factor that may play into that. So they're not over 100 here, and maybe they're thinking we don't need to be over 100 here to be able to compete with all these other providers that are way down here, 15.6 on download, and their upload is even better than the other providers. And then here in Rwanda, again, you've got Starlink is way up here, and it's not quite as bad for all of the providers combined being here. But again, they're doing better there as well. So that's in Africa. Again, a little bit of information here about what's coming in satellites. 2023 space revolution is off to a huge start. After delays, Amazon's Project Kuiper aimed to launch prototype satellites this fall. So that is the big constellation, not as big as far as number of satellites as Starlink's planning, but you can see here 3,236 LEO satellites that they're planning to have in space by 2026. A couple of things that they did here. It mentioned rocket-related delays, but they recently announced it could send its first 2 Project Kuiper prototypes into orbit in late September. So that'd be late this month, I'm assuming. That news follows a recently announced $120 million to $120 million, 100,000 square foot satellite processing facility at Kennedy Space Center. Chile's grand ambitions to provide internet connectivity to over 362 million people. That's about 1 in every 4 people in China, a large portion of which live in rural or remote communities. In order to overcome that connectivity gap, China is looking to the sky to create its own satellite constellation with potentially over 12,000 satellites. So that's like what Starlink is looking at doing across the world. And actually, I think Starlink originally was talking about 36,000 or something like that. I forget how many they've approved from the FCC for right now. China's biggest gap seems to be with recreating the success of SpaceX's reusable rockets. However, initial tests are far underway, and a host of reusable rockets are slated for test launches in 2024. So the question might be, why not just offer a Starlink service in China? Well, China is a communist country, and they like to control the messaging and the communication, and they can't do that with Starlink. And Starlink, Starlink's been known to get involved in certain things. If there's a conflict in Ukraine, for example, they were providing a satellite service to Ukraine so that they could get access to internet when there were some issues there, power cut off, that kind of thing. Not power, but broadband services cut off. So, China has their own reasons, multiple reasons that they want to do their own constellation. So you can see that's a whole bunch of people right now that probably don't have access to internet at all, or maybe they've got some kind of old phone dial-up service. But again, China, the Communist Chinese Party wants to control that messaging, so they're not going to open that up to other people. And if they have their own satellite service, then they can limit what they show people in that country via the internet. SpaceX's Starlink service offerings are about to rapidly expand. While Starlink continues to lead among satellite providers in the most areas of the world, their expansion is only starting. Looking at the Starlink Availability Map, and there's a link to that if you want to check it out, Starlink has an incredibly busy, oh, by the way, I linked to this, I forgot to tell you that, I linked to this Ookla thing in the description of the video if you want to check it out. So Starlink has an incredibly busy rest of 2023 and 2024 in Africa, Asia, and South America, and they're making their intent to expand into most of the world. That comes as Starlink marked launching over 5,000 satellites into space at the end of August, with some wily entrepreneurs already renting out their Starlink dishy McFlat faces, that's funny, to vacationers and campers for $25 to $30 a day. Satellite connectivity is truly becoming a full-time gig. It's kind of interesting that they could provide service over China. I don't think they're necessarily avoiding that territory as they fly over. That would be a difficult thing to do. So they might have satellites passing over there. And I suppose, who knows, there could be a black market for Starlink dishy McFlatface discs out there. They're terminals where maybe people in China could get a hold of them and then have access to broadband from somebody other than the Communist Party. That's an interesting thought. I wonder if that will ever happen. And of course, would China take any? Could they take any kind of actions against Starlink, being as they have? They could probably kill those satellites up there if they wanted to. That would be an international incident, to say the least. ViaSat's bad luck might affect the entire industry. ViaSat launched the first of its 3 long-awaited ViaSat 3 arrays, but then their first satellite suffered an antenna anomaly, which prevented a large reflector to deploy that affects whether or not the satellite can operate as intended. While Viasat is rushing to solve the issue, this could ultimately trigger a $420 million insurance claim for the loss of the $700 million satellite. With such a high value loss, this could send ripples through the satellite industry, causing insurance premiums to skyrocket for companies looking to mitigate potential losses through insurance. All this comes on the heels of acquiring Inmarsat in May for $7.3 billion to expand its satellite arrays, and Spectrum Holdings will be watching to see whether or not Viasat can find a solution. And then we've got Utilsat and OneWeb. They merged. Big moves abound. Utilsat and OneWeb, that merger, and I believe that that's also partially owned by Britain. I believe they came in and helped kind of save that. So Utilsat and OneWeb merger should make competitors take notice, combining satellite networks, expanding enterprise offerings, and competing in emerging markets has big revenue potential, with OneWeb having an already established LEO network of 630 satellites, Utilsat offering 36 GEO satellites. Of note, OneWeb recently inked a deal with Telstra in Australia to provide satellite backhaul for locations where satellite backhaul is a preferred or only viable option. OneWeb is also partnering with the European Space Agency to develop a next-gen 5-beam hopping satellite, which could quickly increase connectivity for people traveling or for disaster areas that need emergency connectivity. Shareholders are set to vote on approving the merger on September 28th. So, and I believe OneWeb's business model wasn't so much like Starlink, where it was selling residential broadband internet service, although it was, I believe, more of a wholesale kind of thing. But that would mean that another service provider could get the service from them and then sell to residential customers. But they've also got this business of backhaul and some other things that they're doing. The European Union greenlights multi-orbit constellation with grand ambitions to launch a multi-orbit €6 billion constellation in 2024. The European Union is partnering with a consortium of industry players, including Airbus, SES, Utilsat, Hispasat, and Thales, to develop the EU's IRIS-2 project. The EU still expects to have the first of its satellites go live by the end of 2024 and have a fully operational constellation by 2027. So here, the European Union would be competing with Utilsat and OneWeb, as well as with Starlink. Usenet aiming to launch the Jupiter 3 array in Q2 2023. Usenet successfully launched its Jupiter 3 array on July 29th, which aims to provide U.S. and Latin American consumers with high broadband download speeds. While the actual satellite will take some time to reach its geosynchronous orbit and deploy, the satellite adds 500 gigs of Ka-band capacity for Usenet, which could see consumers reaching download speeds between 50 and 100 megabits per second. It says we'll be eagerly awaiting speed test results from Usenet's Jupiter 3 array. So, that again is going to be geosynchronous. So the latency problem is still going to be there. I don't think there's anything they can do to speed up the latency. And it's interesting, in space, the signals, there's nothing really to degrade the signal when it's up in space. So latency, that's why low Earth orbit satellites, even though they're hundreds of miles up, the latency isn't so bad. When we're talking about tens of thousands of miles, you get to this 500, 700 well, it's gigabits, but you get to that, 600, 700 megabit, not megabits, millisecond of delay that you get with latency that you get on these geosynchronous satellites. So you're not going to correct for that. They're saying between 50 and 100 megabits per second. So my guess would be it'll be something similar where, most of the time it's be around 50 as they get more subscribers, or say as they launch it, they may be somewhere close to 100. As they get more subscribers, it will get slower over time. And unlike a constellation, if you've got a satellite up there, it's only going to handle so much until you need to launch a whole other satellite. So it'll be interesting to see. And as they say here, they're eagerly awaiting those speed tests. And so it looks like Ookla is keeping track of this. So in addition to general speed test reports that we see from them from time to time, we see these ones on satellite, which I find very interesting. Says satellite again, it's if you've got cable modem service or you've got fiber service, you are not the target customer for these things because you, I'm sure, are very, very happy with your service, relatively speaking. You're maybe not a fan or an evangelist, but you would not trade your wired connection, I don't think, for a satellite service. There would be no reason to do that. Your speeds are going to be slower. Your latency is going to be more. You might have other issues. There are still issues sometimes with really high temperatures or really cold temperatures. There could be situations where you've got maybe some, I don't know if rain fade, how common that is, but there could be some things. But again, somebody who hasn't had broadband service will be a little bit more forgiving with those things. If they're on their internet and it's a day that is 110 degrees in the shade and suddenly the internet goes out for an hour or two, or a big heavy thunderstorm comes through and suddenly their internet's kind of spotty, then they are going to be more forgiving for something like that because they've not had anything nearly what they have there. So that's something to keep in mind. That's why Starlink, good NPS scores, as you might expect, because they are limiting their customer base to those that would be really happy that they have them. Thanks for joining me. I'd appreciate it if you give me a like on the video if you like this video. And if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, ring the bell to be notified when I'm live. I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.